What if, in the next breath, everything you depend on vanished, and you were thrown back into the Stone Age? Imagine the sun has just set on the endless plains of prehistory. Darkness folds over the world like a suffocating blanket. The air chills to your bones, and the sound of predators awakens in the distance. Hyenas laughing, lions prowling, and eyes gleaming in the black void. You have no flashlight, no heated home, no warm jacket, no phone to call for help. Just you, the vast night, and your fragile body vulnerable to every creeping danger. In this moment, one fact becomes brutally clear. Without fire, you wouldn't last the night. Fire was not just warmth. It was survival, protection, and the very spark that separated our ancestors from every other creature clawing for existence. But how did humans first tame this force of nature? What role did fire play in shaping our evolution, our minds, our societies, and even the stories we still tell today? Tonight, we journey back tens of thousands, even millions of years, to uncover why fire wasn't just a tool. It was the very heartbeat of human survival. Stay tuned, because the story of fire is not only the story of our past, but perhaps the reason we're here at all. Before humans learned to summon fire at will, before sparks could be struck from stone or embers coaxed from wood, there was only the raw terror of night and the fleeting mercy of lightning. Picture it. A vast African plain stretching endless beneath a bruised sky heavy with storm. Thunder cracks, a tree explodes into flame, and suddenly, in a world that knew only the steady cycles of day and dark, an unnatural light rages against the void. For most creatures, fire was death, something to flee, to avoid, to fear. But for our ancestors, it was something more complicated, something magnetic. Imagine the scene. Small, trembling figures, creatures still halfway between ape and human, watching from the safety of the shadows, their eyes reflecting the fire's glow, their minds torn between dread and curiosity. Do they dare step closer? Do they dare touch this violent new thing, this alien force that burns flesh but lights the night? For those who did, the reward was monumental. They learned to steal fire, to cradle it, to guard it like a fragile heartbeat. A branch snatched from a dying blaze became treasure. A smoldering ember buried in ash became salvation. They could not yet create fire, but they could preserve it, nurture it, pass it from one hand to another as though it were a living creature. And in many ways, that is how they saw it. Fire breathed, it consumed, it demanded to be fed. It punished carelessness with burns. It punished neglect with extinction. But if respected, if tended, it offered gifts beyond imagination. Archaeologists tell us that in places like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, 1 million years ago, early humans were already gathering around controlled fire. Layers of ash, fragments of burned bone, charred plant remains whisper the story. Here, in this place, fire lived not as a wild destroyer, but as a companion. And what did it mean to gather around that first flame? Imagine a night before fire. Total darkness, pierced only by the stars and the faint glow of the moon. Predators lurked in every direction, their senses sharper than ours, their hunger endless. The darkness belonged to them, not to us. But with fire, everything changed. The night shrank. The predators kept their distance, uncertain of this new light and heat. Lions paused in the grass, hyenas slunk away, even insects buzzed less aggressively in the smoky air. For the first time, our ancestors had carved out a bubble of safety in a hostile world. Yet fire was more than a shield. It was warmth. Those early humans could now push into colder lands, survive nights that once would have frozen them to death, expand their range, and with it, their opportunities. Fire gave them the chance to thrive in environments no other primate dared to enter, but perhaps its greatest gift was food. Think of the first piece of roasted meat, the first tuber softened by flame, the first nut cracked open and toasted by accident in the ashes. Raw food is tough, fibrous, and often toxic. Fire transformed it into meals that were easier to chew, easier to digest, richer in calories. Scientists believe this change was revolutionary. With less energy wasted on chewing and digestion, our ancestors' bodies could invest more in their brains. Over generations, skulls reshaped, jaws shrank, but minds expanded. Fire wasn't just feeding us, it was rewiring us. Yet beyond the physical, fire stirred something stranger, something more mysterious. Have you ever stared into a campfire, watching the flames dance, your thoughts drifting into places you cannot quite name? That same spell must have gripped our ancestors. Around the flames, in the hypnotic glow, they found not just safety, but imagination. Shadows flickered against cave walls, transforming into shapes of beasts and spirits. Faces glowed with eerie light, expressions exaggerated, voices hushed. Perhaps here, in the crackle of the fire, language was born. Not just grunts and gestures, but stories, myths, dreams. A child asked a question, an elder gave an answer. A hunter recounted his day's chase, mimicking the movements of prey, the sounds of danger, until others laughed or gasped in recognition. Fire was not only warmth and light, it was the first stage, the first theater of humanity. But imagine, too, the fragility of this gift. If the fire died in the middle of the night, the consequences were dire. Darkness closed in, predators crept closer, cold seeped into bones. The group might huddle together, desperate, terrified, waiting for morning or for lightning to grant them another chance. Losing the flame was more than inconvenience, it was disaster. And so, fire demanded vigilance. Someone had to feed it, someone had to watch it. Perhaps this. Responsibility gave rise to roles within early groups: keepers of the flame, guardians who stayed awake through the night, eyes fixed on the embers. To hold fire was to hold life, and to lose it was to betray the group. Over time, the presence of fire reshaped daily rhythms. It extended the day. What once ended with sunset now stretched late into the night. People could talk longer, plan more carefully, repair tools, carve weapons, share knowledge. Time itself seemed to expand. The night was no longer a prison, it was an opportunity. And with that opportunity, humans began to separate from every other creature. No animal, no matter how clever, no matter how social, had ever held fire. It was ours alone, a symbol of a new kind of dominance over the world. Yet it was also a danger. Fire could spread. A spark could ignite dry grass. A campfire could become a blaze. For every gift, there was risk. Perhaps this duality, the blessing and curse of fire, explains why it became sacred. Even today, in myths and religions across the world, fire carries a double face. It is divine creation, holy light, the hearth of gods and men. But it is also punishment, hellfire, apocalypse. That tension began here in the Stone Age, when humans first sat before the flames and wondered, what is this thing? Is it alive? Is it ours? Or are we merely borrowing it from the world? The answers may have varied, but the feeling was the same: reverence, fear, awe. The first flicker of fire did not just keep us alive, it made us human. Yet for all its power, this was still a borrowed miracle, stolen from the sky, preserved with trembling hands. Humanity had not yet achieved mastery. We could not summon fire when we needed it. We could not rely on it with certainty. We were still, in many ways, at the mercy of chance. But the seed had been planted, the bond had been forged, and soon our ancestors would not just guard fire, they would learn to create it, to strike sparks, to coax flame, to summon light from stone and wood, as though conjuring life from lifelessness. That moment would change everything. Stay tuned, because the leap from keeping fire to making fire is the leap from survival to supremacy. Imagine the scene. A small band of humans huddled beneath a canopy of stars, the night air sharp and biting, their only warmth a fading ember carried from a fire long ago stolen from a lightning strike. The ember is fragile, threatening to die, and with it, the hope of warmth and safety. For countless generations, this was the pattern. Humans were borrowers, thieves of flame, dependent on the whims of nature. But then something happened, something extraordinary, a moment as monumental as the first step onto two legs or the shaping of the first stone tool. Someone somewhere learned not only to guard fire, but to make it. Picture it. A pair of hands, rough and calloused, working tirelessly. One hand presses a wooden stick against another piece of wood, twisting, grinding. Pushing faster, harder. Smoke begins to rise, faint at first, then thickening. The group gathers, eyes wide, breaths held. A spark catches in dry grass, a tiny glow, almost invisible. Breath feeds it, coaxing it to life. And suddenly, as though the world itself has been reborn, a flame bursts forth. For the first time, fire is no longer a gift stolen from the sky. It is a creation born from human will. The gasp of awe, the cries of triumph, the sheer miracle of this moment cannot be overstated. This was not just a trick. This was mastery. Archaeologists suggest this leap may have come hundreds of thousands of years ago, perhaps around 400,000 years before our time. By then, Homo erectus had already learned to wield fire, but now, with Homo sapiens rising, fire-making became skill, tradition, and inheritance. The methods were simple, but ingenious. Striking flint against iron pyrite to produce sparks, twirling a fire drill in a groove of wood until friction gave birth to heat. Later, the bow drill, a clever device that multiplied force and speed, turning effort into flame. These techniques were not easy. They required patience, coordination, and practice. They had to be learned, remembered, and passed on. Fire-making became one of humanity's earliest technologies, a sacred knowledge entrusted to each generation. Think about what this meant. No longer did humans wait for lightning or volcanic eruptions. No longer did they panic if an ember went out. With the power to summon fire at will, they were free to move, to explore, to inhabit the frozen tundras of Ice Age Europe, the windswept steppes of Asia, the forests of distant lands. Fire became portable, not just in torches and embers, but in the very memory of how to make it. Wherever humans went, fire followed. The implications were staggering. Cooking became routine, not a rare gift of chance. And cooking, scientists argue, was the engine of evolution. Raw meat is chewy, fibrous, difficult to consume. Raw roots and tubers are hard to digest. Fire unlocked nutrients, softened food, killed parasites, and saved energy. With less time spent chewing, imagine the difference between gnawing raw flesh for hours and devouring a tender roasted meal. Humans could redirect their energy elsewhere. Our jaws shrank, our teeth reduced, but our brains grew larger. Some scientists believe that fire, more than any other force, is responsible for the rise of human intelligence. By cooking, we consumed more calories, more protein, more nutrition, fueling a brain that demanded vast energy. Fire didn't just feed our bodies, it fed our minds. But mastery of fire was not only about biology, it reshaped time itself. Once, darkness ruled the night. Now fire banished it. Hunters could prepare weapons long after sunset. Families could gather, plan, teach, share. The day expanded, and with it, knowledge. Around the flames, stories grew longer, more detailed, more elaborate. Shadows danced on cave walls, sparking. Imagination, perhaps even art. The first songs, the first myths, the first philosophies, all may have been born in the circle of firelight. With every strike of flint, with every breath coaxing embers into flame, humanity extended not only its lifespan but its consciousness. Fire gave us hours, but it also gave us meaning. Yet fire was not a tame servant. It remained dangerous, unpredictable, double-edged. To wield fire was to wield power, but also risk. A single spark could destroy a camp, a forest, even an entire tribe. Children learned early the pain of burns, the terror of flames gone wild. Fire had to be respected, controlled, contained, and that control gave rise to ritual. Fire was more than a tool, it was sacred. To many ancient peoples, fire was life itself, a gift from gods or ancestors, a symbol of continuity. To make fire was to perform a kind of magic, to conjure from nothing a force that consumed everything. Perhaps this is why, across cultures, myths of fire theft, fire gifts, and fire gods abound. Prometheus, who stole fire from Olympus, the Maori hero Maui, who wrested it from the goddess of flame, the Zoroastrians, who kept sacred fires burning eternally. All these stories echo the same truth. Fire was not merely survival, it was destiny. But let's return to that moment in the Stone Age when mastery was new and fragile. Imagine the pride of the firemaker, the awe of those who watched. To command fire was to command respect, even leadership. The ability to spark flame may have elevated individuals to roles of authority, guardians of knowledge, teachers of secrets. In this way, fire shaped not only our bodies and minds, but our societies. Those who controlled fire controlled power, and with that power came responsibility. For fire was not just for warmth or food, it was also for defense. A torch could keep predators at bay. A controlled burn could flush animals from hiding. Flames could be used to intimidate rivals, to mark territory, to wage war. Fire was a weapon, and with mastery it became one of humanity's deadliest. Yet in its glow, there was always beauty. Think of the first sparks, the first breath that turned ember to flame. Think of the joy of children watching fire leap alive, the comfort of elders basking in its warmth. Fire was family, safety, memory. It was the constant around which life revolved. To make fire was to ensure continuity, to promise another night of light, another day of survival, and in time it became so second nature, so woven into human life, that we can scarcely imagine existence without it. But pause for a moment and ask, what if this mastery had never happened? What if humanity had never learned to spark fire from stone and wood? Would we have spread beyond Africa? Would we have endured the Ice Age? Would our brains have grown, our cultures expanded, our societies flourished? Perhaps not. Perhaps without fire, humanity would have remained a fragile, marginal creature, forever at the mercy of darkness. Instead, we became something more. With fire, we stepped into destiny. With fire, we began the long journey toward civilization. And yet, as powerful as this mastery was, it was only the beginning. For once fire became permanent, once it was guaranteed, it ceased to be only survival and began to be something greater, the very heart of human community. Stay tuned, because the story of fire is about to move from the spark of mastery to the hearth of home, where flames would not only protect us, but bind us together. Imagine stepping inside a Stone Age shelter at night. The air is heavy with the smell of smoke and roasted meat. The flicker of flames painting the walls in restless shadows. In the center burns the hearth, not just a fire, but the beating heart of life itself. Around it, people gather in a tight circle, pressed shoulder to shoulder, their faces glowing orange, their voices low. Children drowsily lean against their mothers. Hunters repair spears, carefully sharpening points in the firelight. Elders speak in murmurs, their words weaving lessons into the crackle of flame. Without the hearth, this scene would not exist. It was fire that turned scattered individuals into a family. Fire that drew strangers into tribes. Fire that gave humanity not just survival, but society. Before the hearth, we were wanderers, scattered across the savannah, vulnerable to the whims of night. With it, we became something more. The hearth was more than warmth. It was territory. Its glow defined the safe circle where the tribe belonged, the line that predators feared to cross. Step outside that glow, and you entered chaos, darkness, hunger, death. Step inside, and you entered order, community, safety, belonging. Anthropologists believe this invisible boundary may have been humanity's first form of social architecture, the moment when space became structured, when home was more than a physical place, but a circle of light and trust. Who tended the fire? Who sat nearest to its warmth? Who cooked the food? Who distributed it? Who spoke the stories? These were not trivial questions. They were the beginnings of hierarchy, ritual, and cooperation. To share fire was to share identity. It made survival no longer an individual struggle, but a collective bond. Think of the responsibility. If the fire was allowed to die, the group could suffer terribly. Cold would creep in, predators would inch closer, morale would collapse. That's why firekeeping became a sacred duty, perhaps assigned to the young or to those who stayed behind while hunters roamed. To watch the flames was not just labor, it was guardianship. Fire was a fragile heartbeat, and losing it could mean death. Out of this responsibility, rituals grew. Fires were greeted with reverence. Embers were treated like treasure. Myths likely arose to explain the fire's origins, to justify why it must be cared for. The hearth was not just functional, it was spiritual, and what happened within its circle was equally transformative. The hearth became a stage, and in its flickering glow, humanity's first culture unfolded. Picture a child staring into the flames as an elder recounts a hunt, exaggerating with hand gestures, his shadow leaping across the walls. The listeners gasp, laugh, sigh, drawn into the rhythm of the tale. This was more than entertainment, it was education. Stories preserved memory. They taught which plants to eat, which animals to fear, how to hunt, how to heal, how to love, how to grieve. Around the hearth, the abstract world of imagination began to flourish. Myths of spirits in the smoke, ancestors in the flames, gods in the sky, all may have been kindled by these nightly gatherings. But fire did more than ignite stories. It ignited intimacy. In the warmth of the hearth, bonds deepened. People could linger together after the day's labor. They could laugh, mourn, argue, reconcile. They could create rituals of song and dance, moving to the rhythm of crackling logs. In the firelight, human faces came alive, expressions magnified, emotions made vivid. Language itself may have been sharpened here, honed by the need to share, to express, to connect. The hearth became not just a place of survival, but a place of humanity. Our first theater, our first classroom, our first church. And beyond culture, the hearth reshaped daily survival strategies. Fire allowed food to be cooked in new ways, not just roasted on sticks, but stewed in early vessels of clay and stone, expanding diets and possibilities. Smoke cured meat, preserving it for lean times. Fire hardened wooden tools, strengthened spears, and prepared hides for clothing. It was at the hearth that humans innovated, experimenting with materials, testing ideas, passing down skills. You can almost see it, a young apprentice learning to shape a weapon while firelight glints on the blade, an elder guiding his hands with patience. Knowledge, once fleeting, became tradition, stored and transmitted through the continuity of the hearth. But fire was also dangerous, and with it came caution. Sparks could leap, huts could burn, entire shelters reduced to ash. This constant risk demanded careful placement, maintenance, and respect. Out of this vigilance may have grown some of our earliest taboos. Don't leave the fire unattended. Don't waste its fuel. Don't play recklessly with flames. The hearth taught responsibility, and responsibility taught discipline. It was no longer enough to act on instinct. Humans had to plan, to think ahead, to cooperate. Fire also reshaped gender roles, labor divisions, and social patterns. Archaeologists suggest that while men often hunted, women may have been the primary guardians of the hearth, cooking, teaching children, maintaining the flame. In this way, fire reinforced bonds between generations, tying survival to cooperation across age and gender. Around the hearth, children learned skills, women passed wisdom, men returned with spoils, and the cycle of life continued. The hearth was not just physical, it was symbolic of continuity itself, of life passed from one generation to the next. And perhaps most astonishingly, fire altered the rhythm of time. Before fire, night was the domain of predators and sleep. With fire, night became human. Work extended, conversations deepened, rituals thrived. The day doubled, the world expanded. Fire stretched human activity into hours once forbidden, giving us not only more time, but new ways of using it. The night was no longer to be feared. It was transformed into a canvas for creativity. Yet the hearth was not just a space of peace. It could also be a space of politics. Fire conferred power. Those who controlled it wielded influence. Those who failed risked scorn. Imagine a leader deciding how to distribute cooked meat, how to share warmth, how to protect the flame. Around the hearth, alliances were formed, disputes resolved, hierarchies negotiated. Fire forced us to live together, and living together forced us to build society. And so, in the Stone Age, the hearth was the nucleus of human life, the center around which everything revolved. It was a circle of light in a sea of darkness, a fragile miracle sustained by vigilance, cooperation, and reverence. Without it, humanity might have remained scattered, silent, fearful. With it, we became something new. Storytellers, innovators, companions, dreamers. But fire's role would not remain confined to the hearth. As our mastery deepened, flames would leap beyond the boundaries of shelter, shaping landscapes, aiding hunts, and even fueling conflict. Fire would not only unite us, it would give us the means to dominate, to conquer, to transform the world itself. Stay tuned, because the next chapter of Fire's story is not just about home and hearth. It's about fire as weapon, fire as conquest, fire as destiny. And now, After journeying through the Stone Age, let's return to that haunting question. Would you last even a single night without fire? Picture it. No warmth, no cooked food, no circle of light to hold back the predators. The cold gnaws at your bones. The dark swallows every shape. The silence is broken only by the growls and howls of unseen hunters. Without fire, you are prey. With fire, you are human. That simple truth was the dividing line of our existence, the spark that lifted us from fragile animals to the architects of civilization. Fire didn't just protect us, it fed us, taught us, gathered us, and gave us a stage on which imagination itself could be born. It carved out the first homes, forged the first societies, and lit the path into unknown lands. Around the flames, we grew stronger, smarter, braver. We became storytellers, innovators, and dreamers. And though we live today in a world of electric light and digital fire, the truth hasn't changed. We are still drawn to the flame, a campfire under the stars, a candle in the dark, the glow of a hearth on a cold night. These moments reach into something ancient within us, a memory carried in our bones. They remind us that without fire, none of this would exist. No stories, no families, no cities, no us. Fire was our first tool, our first teacher, our first God. It is the reason we survived the night. And so, as you watch the flames dance, remember, you are not just staring at fire, you are staring at the very force that made you human. Without it, you wouldn't last the night.